Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new episodic docu-series, something a little bit different here on the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast. You've probably heard the name we're going to drop here shortly, but you always ask, have you ever thought about starting your own wrestling promotion? Have you ever just kind of wondered what it would be like and how much would what would it take to do it? There's probably a little more than just setting up a ring and starting. And a friend of the show, Gary Lamb, we've been back and forth talking about doing this. And we just thought it'd be really interesting, a good twist to add to the podcast world, because everybody asked that question. And first and foremost, let me welcome in. He's the promoter of Southern Honor Wrestling, based out of Canton, Georgia. Here, one of the hottest promotions in the state. Gary, buddy, what's going on, man?
Oh man, just another day. It's a snowy day of no snow here in Georgia. So school's canceled because of the snow. Yet there's no snow, so the kids are running wild, and I'm locked in a room talking with you.
Well, could be worse things, right? Could
That's
be worse
right.
things. So, but man, kind of first and foremost, I'm going to ask you, because you brought this to us and asked us about it. I mean, just kind of tell us a little background about what kind of sparked your interest on about doing a docu-series, because we haven't decided, is this going to be something we do? Because we thought, hey, how long can we get out of this?
Right.
But I think there's probably more topics than people realize. But I know you get a lot of calls and people ask you about it. So kind of what sparked your interest in even wanting to do this?
I think you just nailed it. We get so many phone calls from people asking about it, asking what can we do to make it happen, asking what our experience has been, and there is nothing online. There's nothing you can find about starting a wrestling promotion, especially if you're an outsider. And I was definitely an outsider when we got started. So just providing a resource and answering those questions that are straightforward and honest and not full of shit, to be honest with you. I don't want to hear the company line, or I don't want to hear the business talk. I want to know the truth about, man, what does it take and what is involved in starting a promotion? I'm in that process right now, so it just made sense. I was like, man, why it's fresh in my mind. Let us talk about the things we're doing, put it to audio, and maybe down the line it can be a blessing to some people.
Couldn't hurt, right?
Couldn't hurt.
I mean, it's because like you said, man, it's and it's funny, even from the podcast world, when we got into doing this, no one was there. We had no one to kind of teach us. We made tons of poor decisions, and what I mean by poor is like even something as simple as like, what equipment should you buy? And we'll go into lots of stuff like that with the wrestling business. And one of the things we pride ourselves on is reaching out to the younger guys, because we seem to be the old guard in this whole scheme of doing podcasting. And I pride myself on answering any questions for anybody that's, calls us, DMs us, whatever. And I think, like I said, it'd be a great resource for that younger generation coming in, because let's be honest with you, we hope, and whether this is, the great thing about podcasting, a guy in the UK can listen to this and, or watch this, and California and Canada and Mexico, doesn't matter. And hopefully they can benefit from it.
Yeah, I think it will be great for people. I think it'll answer a lot of questions. I think it'll help people count the cost before they step out and do something, and realize the prep work that goes into something, the thought process that goes, because every decision you make matters, all the way from what talent you're bringing in, to getting a ring, to creating a logo, to the branding you want to do, to the location you meet in. All of it matters, and a lot of those things, there's simple answers to them, but if you've never done it before, it can be intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, well, and because like you said, there were things we discussed, like why would you even want to start one, or the unwritten rules. We love that one. That's one of those. By the way, that's going to be a great episode.
It's going to be phenomenal.
I bet you that one's long enough that it stands completely on its own.
Yes.
And we will from time to time pair a couple subjects in, because depending on how long we think we can get out of them. But like you said, man, even stuff like branding, social media, all of these things factor in that. We're going to discuss some of them from a different take, but from the business part, they're going to be down the road on episodes, and we'll let you know when those are coming. But I think one of the biggest questions you got to ask yourself, and agree with me or disagree, tell me, do you not have to at some point when you decide, I want to do this, you have to answer this first question before you even start. Is it a hobby, or are you doing it to be a business?
Yeah, I would say there's three questions you have to ask, or three opportunities. Is it a hobby? Is it a side hustle? Or is it a business? And they're all different. I mean, this is something that we had to answer that question. It was something interesting with my partner, because My partner, who I love, this is a hobby to him in every aspect. He's getting to live his dream. He's always wanted to have a great promotion and be able to do all the stuff that Southern Honor's doing. And if he never made a dime in the beginning, he would have been happy. Now he's seeing, because we've treated it like a business and we're starting to be profitable after 5 shows, his tune's kind of changed and he's got used to that. And it's a nice change for him. He looks at everything as a business. I kind of got teary-eyed this week when he called me this week about bringing a certain athlete in, and he talked about the money for the first time ever. He's like, it doesn't make a lot of sense from a business standpoint. And I was like, man, it's taken me 5 months to get through his head. We decided we're doing this as a business. I have enough hobbies. I have 5 kids in my house. I don't need another hobby. And so we did this to make money. Now, we did it to make money because it was something we loved. I've always heard, man, find something you love, do it for the rest of your life, and what's they'll saying, you'll never work a day in your life. And I agree with that. It's much more like fun than it is work. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and the bottom line is what matters. We do this to make money at Southern Honor Wrestling.
And that's, I mean, I guess, like I said, because every decision we're going to talk about over the next weeks, months, who knows, I think that's kind of primarily where you got to kind of fall in, is that simple question. We'll ask the first question, like, why would you even want to start one? Right. I mean, that's a huge question on it. So from a hobby or a business, I guess you got to ask yourself, and what was your thought process of why start a wrestling promotion, based on a business or a hobby, but focusing on, if you're just wanting to do it as a hobby, why would somebody even do that?
I think if someone wants to do it as a hobby, you do it because you do love it. You see that you could be part of something cool. It would give you an opportunity. You grew up as a kid playing. My son's 7 years old, and I walked in the bedroom last night, and he had all of his wrestling figures laid out on the floor, and he's putting matches together, and he's got them behind his back where he can't see them, and he's reaching back there and randomly grabbing people because he's doing a Royal Rumble, and he doesn't want to know who comes out next. And so from a hobby standpoint, it's a fun hobby. You get to put yourself in, it's like Monday morning quarterbacking, except you get to be the quarterback now. You never get to go into an NFL game. You never get to go into an NBA game and actually be part of it. In the wrestling industry, you can start a promotion and have a lot of fun. Bring in some of your favorite people, do storylines you've always thought about doing, and you can have a freaking blast in it. But if you want to make money at it, it's got to be more than a hobby.
And it seems, let's be honest with you, we hear a lot of promotions that are out there. They're vanity promotions. I've always wanted to see, like you said, I've always wanted to see this wrestler wrestle this guy. Right. So I'll just pay to make it happen, and at my show.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all, man. If you have the resources and the time, and that's what you want to devote your time to. Some guys devote their time to deer hunting. Some devote it to golfing. Some devote it to whatever. I think that's phenomenal if you want to do that. That wasn't the road that we were headed down. So I was a wrestling fan. I loved wrestling. My kids were into wrestling. But I was content, if it was just going to be a hobby, to go twice a month to the local show here in town and sit there and enjoy it and watch it and not have the headaches of it. But I look at it as another revenue stream. The way I'm wired is I make all my money from promoting events. And so wrestling just seemed like another opportunity for me to promote something and put on events, which I'm pretty good at. And it's been it's been profitable for us.
So let me, I don't know how much you can go into as far as like partners and things like that. But is that something that you encourage? I mean, as far as the sake of, if it was a hobby, would you have just done it on your own? I know you said personally you would have just continued to go to shows.
Right. I have owned my own business. I'm 42 years old. I've owned my own business since I was 20 years old. I've probably started 7 or 8 different businesses in a lifetime. And I've always avoided partnerships. And I've always said anything with 2 heads is a monster, and partnerships don't work. And yet here I am with Southern Honor, and I have 2 partners. And I have to tell you, I couldn't imagine it going any smoother. But it was the right opportunity. It was the right situation. It was very much 3 guys who know their role. We give input all around the board, but we all stay in our lane. I promote. I run the business. My partner, Dylan, books the shows. He puts out the videos. Our partner, Nathan, does the filming, adds insights into it. Has got several connections in the music world and different things that opens up doors for us. Everybody knows their role. And at this time, 5 months in, egos have stayed out of the way, and the partnership has been phenomenal. And it's taken a huge load off me. And I think you see the excellence level in our show because everyone's able to focus on their strengths.
And so from yours, obviously you've brought up that yours is the business side of it. Obviously that's why we're sitting here. But I think another one, it's a little, I did want to mention this kind of the same way. This would be, I think, whether you're doing it in a business or whether you're doing it as a hobby, I think one of the things, deciding to start your own promotion too, especially with independent wrestling so popular, they can all look the same.
They can.
You got to find your own lane and, find your own niche. So when you guys sit down at the beginning, just kind of how does that conversation go? I mean, a little bit.
I would definitely say initial conversations were fueled by me. I was the one who wanted to start one. I led the vision. I drove the car in that area. Through talking to some other people and sharing the vision that I had, they then hooked me up with Dylan, who then hooked me up with Nathan. I went down to their work, sat in a conference room with them, cast the vision for what I was envisioning Southern Honor to be, a very high production show, amazing athletes, incredible environment, crossover where it's more than just a wrestling show. It's kind of an experience. As I was communicating this to them, I could see that they're grasping what I'm talking about. They'd never seen that on a local scale. They wanted to be part of something bigger. I am a big believer when it comes to vision, there needs to be somebody driving the vision. There needs to be the visionary. And I would say for the most part, I'm the visionary. As we're 5 months in, that is, Dylan has embraced that a little bit more. I've let go of the reins and the control freak a little bit more. But Dylan and I, just sometimes you meet people and you connect. He was able to take my vision that I had up in the clouds, and he was able to bring it down into the dirt and make it happen.
And, I guess that's you having your partners to kind of balance that. And you mentioned Nathan. Is he kind of the technical side? Is that what kind of his strength seems to be?
Nathan is very creative. He does all the filming. He's just very connected. Nathan is definitely the connected person. He has great connections. I mean, he's videoed Stone Cold Steve Austin. He has done Chris Jericho. He's did the Jericho Cruise. He's got lots of connections in the music world and the wrestling world. And I think Nathan is probably, of all the partners, definitely the most silent of the partners. He's kind of the voice of reason. He steps in when it's me and Dylan. Me and Dylan are definitely the day-to-day operations. Nathan is able to step in when me and Dylan, we kind of have a policy. It's 3 thumbs up on everything. And if we're not all in agreement, we don't move forward with that. And so Nathan's able to step in, especially with me when I'm wanting to try a lot of things as an outsider in the industry. That's an interesting dynamic too. I'm an outsider in the industry. Dylan's an insider in the industry. I don't care about burning bridges. Dylan very much cares about burning bridges in the industry. And so sometimes our vision can conflict in that. And Nathan's really good about coming and kind of being the balancing act in that.
Well, let's take a second to sidebar into that, because you brought it up, being the outsider, coming from outside the wrestling world. Let's be honest. You catch flack from time to time about being the outsider,
right?
Not being in the business. And that's kind of why we thought this whole docuseries would be a unique perspective, because you wouldn't be subjected to those, like I said, the unwritten rules, which we'll discuss on another episode.
Right.
Kind of like from an outsider, give me just your, what it's been like for you coming into the business from outside.
It's been very different. It's easy for me because of the way I'm wired. I don't care of being the outsider. I didn't get in this to make friends with everyone. Now, that being said, let me make this very clear. I hope to be friends with everyone, but whether or not people like me or don't like me doesn't really influence me. Wrestling is a very steeped traditional format. There's a way you do wrestling shows, and there's the way you pick towns, and there's the way you put on shows. And it's normally guys that have paid their dues and been in the industry forever. And even if they're not necessarily qualified for a role because they've been doing it forever, they move into a role and they just kind of take it on. Then you bring an outsider who, I know nothing about the wrestling business, except what I'm learning as we go now. I've never wrestled a match. I've never been to school. I've never booked talent in wrestling. I've never laid out a show. I have never thought about angles and shoots and works and all the stupid terms that come up with everything. But I know business. And so what I saw in wrestling, what Gary Lamb saw, my opinion only, let me just put that disclaimer out there, was a bunch of people who loved a sport and loved an industry, but didn't necessarily know how to run a business. And so what I interpret that as was it was very poorly run shows. There was no way people were making money. What I thought could be a lot better. So I didn't think I needed to know the wrestling business. I think I needed to know business and bring fresh perspective and fresh ideas, because just like you said, you can look at every wrestling promotion in Georgia and by their posters, it's the exact same show everywhere. And unfortunately, if you go to those shows, a lot of times it's the exact same show everywhere. So I didn't want us to be that. So bringing fresh perspective to that has definitely, I think, for lack of a better word, it's kept it fresh and brought a lot of great ideas into Southern Honor. When people walk in the doors, it doesn't feel like the typical independent wrestling show.
And like I said, you're talking about from the business, being from outside, making money. And that's kind of the foundation of this whole docuseries, is we're trying to say, like, if you're in it to make money, you're going to want to listen again and again and again, because we're going to tackle each topic. And feel free. We actually, it's a funny thing I was going to surprise you with. I'm going to let people email us, awesome. DM us at Tapped Out Pod on Twitter, email us at tappedoutpod@gmail.com, questions and stuff. Give us some ideas of topics. If you ever wanted to be a promoter, what would you want to hear somebody take? Throw that in there, because I think that'll be a cool little twist. From week to week, we may not decide. Let somebody from outside decide what the topic.
Yeah, and I'm an open topic. Love me or hate me, I don't have anything to hide. And I'll tell you, I'm not just going to tell you everything we've done right. I'll tell you everything we've done wrong too. Because, man, I want someone to come along and do better than us. I want them to come along and say, man, here's some mistakes Gary made and Southern Honor made. And why would I want someone to go through the same headaches we went through? I mean, we burned a lot of bridges early on in probably ignorance and not knowing how to do stuff the right way.
Well, and I'll attest to that, because as silly as it sounds, at the last show, what did I do? You sat down next to me and I said, hey, man, you know what I would do?
Right.
And you were like, that's not a bad idea.
Right.
I might have to try that.
I think it's huge. I think we get so caught up in our only way of doing things when there's such fresh perspective. And for example, our booking, Dylan does 90% of our booking. And at the end of the day, he has 100% authority to do whatever he wants to. But I would say the 10% that Nathan and I add are some of the key elements, because you can get in the rut of only seeing it from your eyes, and someone else's eyes come along and see it. And the smallest idea turns into this big idea that turns into a great angle that turns into something awesome, because we were open and we put our egos out of the way to learn from other people.
And sometimes you're too close.
Right.
And I totally agree. But let's tackle some of these because from weeks down the road here, it's all going to be about business. I wanted just for one half of an episode, let's take the perspective of, if it was a hobby, how would you do it? Because I know that's not what you do, but I wanted to ask you a couple of topics we're going to address down the road.
Okay.
Like one of them we're going to talk about is revenue streams. I mean, if you're doing this as a hobby, there's no revenue streams. You're not looking at it for that purpose. So there's really no point really.
If it's a hobby, you're looking to sell enough tickets to pay your talent where you're not losing money. If you broke even, that'd be great.
Right. That's truly it. But some other ones are like, would you bring in stars? Would you build your own stars? I guess from a hobby standpoint, you're going with the first, right? Just bringing in guys you want to see.
I think it depends on it goes back to your preference in a hobby. If you're a mark and you like certain people and you've always wanted to bring them in, and I feel like in wrestling, this word mark is a bad thing. I don't mean it in a disparaging way at all, man. But if you've got people you want to bring in, you bring in. I'm a creator. I'm a starter. So even if it was a hobby to me, I want to bring people in, brand them, create them, put storylines around them. So even if it was a hobby to me, I'm probably not going to bring in bigger names unless it's just somebody that I want because I'm so smitten with them. You know what I mean?
Like a guy that you just have dreamed about seeing up
right, exactly.
business with, so forth and so on. Same thing. I mean, storyline writing kind of goes hand in hand. I guess if you're doing it for fun and you wanted to see, as from a hobby standpoint, like I wanted to always see these guys get there, but you don't want to do the one-off because that's the easy, right? Just put two guys, have them wrestle, but you want them to build so there's something there.
That's what I want to do. But I mean, again, if it's a hobby, this weekend we have a big show here in Atlanta, and that's a one-off show from a group out of Texas. And I'm not saying it's a hobby for those guys, but they're not looking long-term for anything. It's not like they're trying to build storylines or characters. They're basically putting on an all-star show. And it's an incredible show. Like the lineup's incredible. I'm sure they're having a blast with it. Now, are they going to make money with it? I don't know. Like as an outsider who knows business, I'd like to see the numbers because I don't think they are.
And that, to me, I guess because we're the same from the cloth of, I've been a wrestling fan for 40, plus years as a young kid, but my retail was my life up
Right.
until, to the recent, and I'm all about making the money, and I'll sit there and analyze something to death when it comes to numbers. And I agree, everything should be a business in your life to some degree.
Right.
You shouldn't get into anything to lose money.
I tell people all the time, I'm my biggest business. You know what I mean? It's funny. I always get accused of being a loose cannon on social media or saying whatever. And I always laugh because I don't ever post anything loosely. Even if it seems like it was posted loosely or without thought, it was posted with a lot of thought because I realize being a promoter, I'm my biggest brand. And so I've got to create the buzz and I've got to create this and I've got to create that. And to portray the image that I want to do, everything, including yourself, a business. It's funny. I actually had this discussion with my 12-year-old daughter last night. So, because I want her to realize, man, stupid stuff you do right now affects you forever nowadays.
Kids don't get it. We had this conversation a lot. Just another sidebar while you're there, though, the booker in the house seems to be the little man.
Yes, my 7-year-old son is consumed with wrestling to the point that he's a detail guy, and questions about everything, whether it's watching the Royal Rumble or whether it's watching a Southern Honor show. It's always, Dad, I just don't understand. And then he goes into his logic of not understanding. And that was one of the reasons you asked early on, why wrestling? Because my dad taught me when I was 16, I was into comic books and baseball cards, and we opened a comic book and baseball card store. So I wanted to be able to do a business that provided for our family, but I also wanted to do something that'd be fun that my kids would enjoy being part of. And my kids are consumed with wrestling right now.
And it goes back to the outsider's perspective of sometimes people have to realize, and we'll cover this down the road, I'm sure, but sometimes we get too close, like we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Sometimes the 7-year-old viewpoint is what you need to pay attention to because they don't buy tickets, but their parents buy tickets. And this is again, down the road, I'm sure, but for paying tickets and selling tickets, a smart mark, which again, not necessarily is a bad term.
No.
Everybody's saying, is a 28-year-old single guy. He's going to buy one ticket.
Right.
If the 7-year-old convinces his mother to buy him a ticket, it's mom, dad, kid, and then and then they're buying merch, and then there's business people. Sometimes don't get caught up on who the guy reading the internet and getting him to the show. He's coming anyway. Yeah,
it was a big deal actually when we started, because the show that I was watching here in town was probably as good of a family-friendly show as there is. I mean, to the point that if it was a rating system, it'd be rated G. And I thought you could push the envelope a little bit, but the minute I used that phrase that you could push the envelope, they then started announcing that we weren't a family-friendly show. Well, we're a very family-friendly show. Well, family-friendly is a little bit different than what it was 20 years ago. I have no concerns about my kids being there, but we had to go back and change our marketing and change our presence for a while to very much emphasize that we're a family-friendly show, because you cannot build a local independent wrestling promotion without reaching kids.
Oh, absolutely.
We allow kids 10 and under free at our show. That's how important it is. So
I agree. It's not going anywhere. But like you said, you're talking about reaching that outer audience and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of that has to go, when you were talking about branding, you have to be family friendly. You can push the envelope in areas. Don't go too far. Where too far is. And branding, obviously, something that you're really like looking at is from your company to be the best here in Georgia, and then eventually down the road. So now I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you some topics, because here's where we're at. So we've talked a little bit about being a hobby and doing it for fun and stuff like that. But we all know if you're really doing this, you should be doing it as a business. You should be doing it to make money.
Yeah, why not? It takes the same amount of work, whether it's a hobby or a business. So why not do it right and make money at it?
So I'm going to rattle off some topics. And from a business perspective, because this is called, folks, this is a tease. These are going to be episodes down the road that you're going to keep an eye out for. So I'm going to give you a topic, give us a quick hit of like, what might we talk about during that? You know, just a minute or two on each one here. And, you know, we'll start off with everybody, you know, multiple revenue streams.
Yeah, I think multiple revenue streams is huge. And I think it is probably one of the number one factors that is missing in local independent wrestling. They're looking at ticket sales and ticket sales only. I actually had about an hour and a half discussion the other day with one of the premier, probably the longest tenured promoters in the state, where he was picking my brain on different revenue streams, because after coming to several of our shows, he realized all the different revenue streams that we have. And I want the more hooks I got in the water, the more fish I'm going to catch. And so we're going to talk about everything from ticket sales to VIP sales to pricing, the difference on your front row to your third row to your general admission to concession stands to merch to we're even talking about adding some VIP experiences and some after show one-man shows that people can pay extra to go watch, and social media, your videos, putting your broadcasting live. That's something we haven't tapped into yet, but we're definitely exploring, where people have to pay for content. There's so many different avenues in that regard that guys are just leaving on the table when there really not any extra money. You have the content, you have the video, you have the resources to do them. Just make them available. People will pay for them. Or that's been our experience, that people will pay for them. And so
we're going to come in that, like I said, that whole episode, we can talk, you know, about what they can do, avenues they can take, you know, ideas, things like that. That's going to be a great
episode. I'll tell you some things we tried that didn't work too. So,
well, that's the big part.
Yeah.
Always teach people with the mistakes. So mistakes you can typically learn more from than any success you're going to have. You know, we talked about bringing in the stars, paying your wrestlers, all that kind of stuff. I think that's kind of a lump show to some degree.
Yeah, I think booking is a huge show and a lot of elements go into it. And probably the number one thing that has surprised me the most is paying guys. This guy gets this amount because every guy doesn't make the same amount. You know what I mean? And so balancing it out with your overall budget and the talent level that you want to bring in, and balancing that out amongst their following and their fans, and then bringing in stars, the pros and the cons as I see it. That is definitely one of the areas that me and Dylan, my partner, don't always see eye to eye on in that regard. And so that'll be an interesting discussion. It might be even one of those things that might be cool to bring Dylan on and give both perspectives.
Absolutely. And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to mention about this, is that we are open to the idea. We've discussed it, and we're in talks to some of those people. We're not going to be, you know, on one hand, it's your idea, it's your, you know, it's your baby that we kind of are cultivating, but will you see, Dylan, you know, your booker? Will we see other promoters, other hot promoters that are doing a lot of things right? We're going to reach out to them, and, you know, I've talked to them about coming on and maybe giving their perspective, because there could be two ways to skin a cat, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think I don't want to use too many local terms, because if you're listening from all over, you're not going to understand that. But here in Georgia, we're Southern Honor Wrestling. Probably the hottest promotion in the state is an organization called Southern Fried. I don't know, from a show perspective, you could have two different shows on opposite ends of the spectrum. It doesn't make one right and one wrong. They're just two very different shows visually, two different shows marketing-wise, two different shows structure-wise, and yet both of them are seeing great success. The only thing in common is the word Southern, I think. So, but who am I to ever say they're wrong? They're the ones we're chasing. You know what I mean?
They take awards, you know.
They ran the table this year in the state of Georgia.
And, you know, and we were honest, because when we early on met, you're like, who are we chasing? And I'm like, dude, it's not even close. It's Southern Fried and everybody else. So, and that's, so who knows? We'll reach out to, you know, to David and say, hey, I mean, let's see, you know, what's their logic? Maybe Todd. You never know, right? The great thing about independent wrestling, especially here in Georgia, there's so many successful people that you could tap into and bring on. That's a huge
and I think it'd even be cool to bring on some of the athletes, some of the wrestlers. I would love to hear their perspectives on dealing with a guy who was an outsider. I know it rubbed some of them wrong in the early days when they would walk in and I would immediately say, I don't like this about your gimmick and I don't like this about your look. And they're like, who the hell is this guy? Now, does he know anything about wrestling? I don't know anything about wrestling, but I know what visually looks good and how to market and brand. And that was some interesting dynamics early on, to the point that we didn't use some guys over it.
And that's good. Like I said, that's maybe, booking talent, paying talent. That episode, we get a top guy. I've got a guy off the top of my head. He wrestles for you. He wrestles for a lot of other promotions.
Yeah.
He'd be a great get to sit there and hear his take because everybody's itching to get the guy.
Yeah.
So, but man, like I said, there's so many things between, and then of course my favorite, this episode we're going to have so much fun with. There's a guest I'd love to have. I don't know that it can happen because I don't know if they would sit through it. And what I mean by sit through it, they would probably, their head would explode when we talked about unwritten rules of wrestling.
Yes.
About how did this even happen?
Right. And there's a lot of unwritten rules, and I didn't know about them because they were unwritten.
Yeah.
And we stepped on a lot of toes, and you've got to decide early on, do you care or not care about the unwritten rules? And again, there's not a right or wrong answer to that. For us, I'll make this as clear as possible. I don't care about the unwritten rules because it's a business to me. And so I'm not going to jump through hoops on a bunch of unwritten rules that don't put more money in my pocket.
And let's be blunt, man. This is what we're talking about. It's a business. And that's why when you look at the title, business is in quotations.
Exactly.
And, it's all going to come down from the weeks and the months going down the road. How do you make money? How do you, what mistakes and let's, like we said, you'll admit where you made mistakes. You're going to admit, hey, this worked.
Yeah.
This didn't work. And it's crazy thing. This may not work in all areas.
It's a business. I'll take it to another level. It's a business in every aspect. It's a business down to the guy that we get our ring from. He runs a ring rental business. It's a business down to the wrestlers. I can tell you the guys that show up to make money and the guys who don't show up to make money, the guys who understand the importance of merch, the importance of working their table, the importance of social media. Why? Because it's a business. And so you can show up at your promotion for your $25 and a hot dog, or you can show up and treat it like a business for your $25 and a hot dog and make another $200, $250 by shaking hands and kissing babies and getting out there and hustling with your merch. So
the wrestler is the brand, the promotion is the brand, and everything's got to be pushed the right way.
Yep.
And like I said, if you're in for a hobby, the docuseries that we're talking about here in, the wrestling business, maybe for you because maybe it'll change your opinion.
Yeah. I'd love to get Ox on here one day and having a whole episode on the business of ring rental, because I got to be honest with you. That's something I talked about doing one time. I was like, well, man, if we buy a ring, then we can make money. I know David Manders rents out his ring. We weighed the cost and the headache of it and decided for us it wasn't the right business. Ox is making a good living doing that. That's another perspective on the business of wrestling. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you something. I've made a huge rookie mistake in podcasting. So what I'm going to do is let you talk for about 60 seconds while I go get my computer charger before my computer dies, and I'll be right back while you continue to ramble about what we're going to do.
Okay. Well, down the road, what we're looking at doing, folks, is pretty easy. Like you said, if this is a hobby for you and it's something that you want to do, that's great. And this docuseries you'll learn. It may change your mind. You may go on to becoming, somebody who's doing this from a business weekend, once a month. But if not, maybe it'll even you can still learn from a hobby. But this whole show going forward with Gary and myself, it's going to be about how to make money and how to, be in the business, mistakes that were made, mistakes that weren't made, the outsider coming in, me personally, I always tell people I'm not in the wrestling business. I'm just a podcast guy who's been a fan for 40 years. I'll give my take from time to time on, from what I've seen and what I've learned. But this is from a guy who spent 30, I always say 30, but right at 25 years examining P&Ls, going over EBITDA, that's my background as well before I got into the podcasting thing. So that's why I was so intrigued about the business, quotations there.
Well, like the business of podcasting, like you should always have your computer charger there. See, I just learned something right here today.
Rule number one, always have your stuff charged up. Exactly. And there is, like I said, we could do a whole episode. Trust me, I could do a whole episode on getting into podcasting about business. And it's the crazy thing because as many wrestlers that have podcasts out there, I tell wrestlers all the time, there's a business for being on podcast. You should be on every podcast that would let you remotely get airtime.
It's amazing to me the difference in those who treat it like a business and those who don't. And I'll throw out my first. I don't want to get into dissecting an individual, but it's funny to me in wrestling, and maybe it's this way in every industry, but we're not talking about every industry. There's almost a jealousy of those who treat it like a business. And the funny thing is, everybody wants to make money. And I always use Paul Lee as an example of this. You can love Paul Lee. You can hate Paul Lee. If you don't know who Paul Lee's gimmick is, go look it up. It's a controversial thing. A lot of people are not fans of Paul Lee. And I tell people all the time, Paul Lee's a businessman and he's making money and he's hustling and he's getting to do what he loves because he's hustling with his gimmick. And it's funny. Everybody will sit back and criticize him, but everybody that's criticizing him would give anything to make the amount of money he's making in independent wrestling as an independent wrestler.
Yeah, I mean, and even in the history, like it was funny. There was something there in the past with us with him, but it was, hey, look, it's not for everybody. Some people love it, some people hate it, but you can still respect it from a business point, and that's always me.
Right.
I don't have to like your gimmick to understand it.
Right. I remember big guy that you're a fan of, Ray Fury, showed up, and I have no clue what Ray Fury made at our show and merch, but I would imagine it was good based on his merch layout. He came prepared to sell shirts and to sell masks and to sell key rings and to sell whatever he could. So we pay him X amount of dollars. I think it's safe to say that he probably left there with 2 or 3 times what we paid him. And so many guys want everything handed to them. I make X amount of dollars. Well, you can make a lot more money if you treat it like a business. Mm-hmm. GPW is a local wrestling promotion. Here was the wrestling promotion I talked about. And I learned that from them. So when you walked into their show, they had ticket sales, they had concessions, and then they had I don't even know what you would call it. They probably had the most extensive wrestling collectibles area I'd ever seen. I don't know the story about how they obtained all that stuff, how they purchased all that stuff, but I would watch people walk all around that show, the kids, with stuff they had bought from those merch tables, and I'm sure they made as much from that table as they did in ticket sales every show. I would assume. Now, I don't know anything about their numbers, but how genius you're there already. Why not have that hook in the water, pulling more fish out of the water? My goal is, I'm a business. My goal is to empty your pockets when you come to our show. It's worth it for me to let a kid 10 and under come in free to a show knowing that they're going to spend $10 or $12 at the concession stand driving the parents crazy. So that's a win-win. It makes my place look full, which creates a buzz, and then I still get their money because they spend it at the concession stand and they spend it on merch.
Absolutely agree. So we're going to go, like I said, is there anything, let's give the big sales pitch here before we wrap up about what can they look forward to. We kind of got into a little bit, but this was just a little tip to tell them why do they want to follow up episode after episode and what they can look forward to down the road as far as what are you going to give them for the wrestling business.
I'm going to give them whatever you ask me. And the reason they need to tune in is because I'm not going to bullshit them. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to shoot straight about what we've learned in the 5 months that we've been doing Southern Honor, what we've done right, what we've done wrong, what was missing in what we've done, what was confusing in what we've done, our thought process behind everything we have done. I'm going to bring in an outsider's perspective on the wrestling industry. If you want to make money, I don't care if it's as a promoter or even a wrestler, I'm going to make you think outside the box based on the questions you ask me and give you a fresh perspective on what many might call a stale industry. And I think that will be very cool. I don't think anything's ever been done like it. I don't think that we're going to make a lot of friends doing it because I think that we're going to pull back behind the curtain and show you the Wizards, just a little midget back there spinning a handle. But I think it will help a lot of people down the road. Anything worth doing is worth doing well. And I think wrestling has been done poorly for so long. And it's time. I believe now is our time in independent wrestling to show people what it can be and what it should be. And it's an exciting time to be in the industry.
I agree with you 100% there. So, man, enjoy the ride, folks. It's probably going to be a bi-weekly, is what we're thinking. But always, you can always look on the website at tappedoutlpod.com. The schedule's there. We post it on all of our social media
We'll be posting it. And I like what you said too. We've got a list of topics. I guarantee you we overlooked a lot of topics. So man, if there's something we overlooked, man, send those in. You know what I mean? And I mean, even when it comes to me and I think another interesting topic would be how you're going to promote your promotion. We very much decided from day one we were going to be us against the world in our promoting. That doesn't work for everyone. And that's the number one question my partners get asked all the time. Is Gary an asshole? Is it a shoot or is it a work? You know what I mean? And their favorite answer is it's both. And
that's usually my answer.
Right. And but I get that. But what they don't understand is there was a strategy behind every aspect of it. What everyone saw as us being rebellious and shooting off, there was a strategy. So I think we're going to help you, whether you're a wrestler, whether you're a wrestling promoter, what is your strategy? What are you trying to accomplish? And I think a great one to bring in here would be O'Shea Edwards. To me, he's got a goal, and I see him take the steps to achieve his goal all the time. He's a hustler, and I dig that about him.
He could probably be arranged. I think we both have enough.
I think we have enough connections with him to make that happen. And I think it's one of the reasons what I have learned in my short time in the wrestling business is I get along really, really well with those who treat it like a business. Mm-hmm. And those that don't want to treat it like a business and want to treat it in the traditional way it's always been treated, they don't care for me. And I don't think one's right or one's wrong. But if you want to make money and you want to promote yourself or your business, I think this is going to be a cool podcast for that. And I think you've got the insider knowledge to be able to ask the right questions for me to be able to give the answers. Again, not saying our answers are right, just from our perspective as someone who literally is we're not giving you theory here. We're giving you practicality because we're literally and we're not giving you outdated practical advice. We're giving you, hey, 2 weeks ago, here's what we did, and it worked. A week ago, we did this, and it didn't work.
And the cool thing about our relationship, how this even happened, is on our podcast, I'm the one who would more than likely call you to the car. If I disagree, I'll sit there like, I just don't think that works.
Right. And I want to hear but I like that and I think another cool thing is you've been to, I think, every show of ours except the first one, maybe.
Yep, that's right.
And so stuff that I was like, man, this is awesome and this works. I'd love when you're like, it didn't work for me. And here's why it didn't work for me. Because again, doesn't make me right and you wrong, or you wrong and me right. Different perspectives are great. And maybe every once in a while we bring even Myron on here. Myron's just fun for being a fun-loving fan, but he brings a different perspective on what worked and what didn't work. The three of us are in conversations all the time, and we don't always agree.
Lots of times we don't.
Right. We always know I'm right, but I mean, still. It doesn't matter.
Well, like I said, so if just kind of before we go home, the things we're going to give the fans, we're going to give them some homework. Wrestlers, we're going to give you homework. Promoters, homework. Again, we're going to share it out there. It's at Tapped Out Pod on DM. You can DM us on Twitter, private message us on Facebook. You can tappedoutpod@gmail.com, anywhere. And I mean, hey, Southern Honor Wrestling, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, all that good stuff. Your Twitter is, what's that again? I just want to make sure I don't mess it up.
S Honor Wrestling.
That's right. S Honor Wrestling.
And everything else is Instagram and Facebook is Southern Honor Wrestling.
If you're a wrestler, if you're a promoter, hey, we're open to bringing on, friend of the show, Larry Goodman, anybody.
Oh, I'd love to have Larry on here.
Shoot out, a message to us. Let us know, hey, you've got a topic you want to discuss and you want to be the one on the show to go with it. That can all be arranged, because this is going to be a behind the curtain look, but it's going to be an open and honest. And when we mean open, shoot us a message and get involved. It's that simple.
I'll give you an interesting topic today. Larry, he just could not avoid bringing it up. He put out a report of our upcoming show, a preview of our show, and brought up the way our last show ended and put in there wanting to know if we had staged that or not staged it. He bid on that avoided it for the last 3 posts and had to throw it in this post. And I think that's an interesting conversation on what as a wrestling promoter, do you need a script and what do you not need a script? I tend to believe I want every aspect of everything scripted because I know what I'm trying to create. And so, but that was a controversial subject. A lot of people agreed and a lot of people didn't agree. I don't think either one of them are right or wrong.
And that's the great thing about wrestling.
Right. At the end of the day, what I do doesn't affect anybody else but Southern Honor family. It affects our athletes and our fans. So again, and what Southern Fried doesn't affect me. If Southern Fried has 1,000 people this Saturday, I hope they do. At the end of the day, it doesn't affect me. I don't get $1 off that. And if they have 100 people, it doesn't affect me. And so we need to learn how to play in our own sandbox and still be friendly with the people in the next sandbox over, and just let people do what they want to do, especially in an industry where everything's a work.
Yeah.
Until you offend somebody.
Well, and that's another topic I haven't even mentioned to you yet, is all the controversies of, does Joey Ryan belong in wrestling?
Right.
Priscilla Kelly, all that kind of stuff. Does that belong?
Episode.
That's a whole episode.
It is a whole episode. What you're going to find out from me is I believe it all belongs, but it doesn't mean I like it all. It doesn't mean I want to see it all.
And that's wrestling. Like I said, man, we come back to that. That's wrestling. How many
times? The free market.
Yeah. If you don't want to see it, don't pay the ticket, right?
Right.
But man, it's all about selling tickets. It's all about making money, because it's real simple, guys. This, like we said, we've over and over again, this docuseries will totally be about the wrestling business.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. Business, the rest, and make no mistake about it, it's a business.
Absolutely. Well, man, join us next time. Like I said, Gary, we're gonna wrap up here on the first one. As pleasure as always, man. I'm excited about doing this, so I hope you're ready to take the ride too.
It's gonna be a blast, man. I look forward to it.
All right, guys. Well, like I said, if you're in to make money, man, there's only the most fun place I can think of is the wrestling business.